The slap cracked through the diner and nobody moved. Coffee hit the floor, the waitress froze, and the sheriff smiled, until he realized the man watching him hadn't blinked once. In that silence, the sheriff thought he'd won, but he'd just been marked. If this story pulled you in, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. I've got another unforgettable story dropping tomorrow. And while you're here, jump into the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our community from all around the world. All right, let's get back into it. The slap lands sharp and loud, the sound cutting through the diner like broken glass. Clara Mitchell staggers back, coffee spilling across the counter, dripping onto linoleum that's absorbed too many stains. The room freezes, not in shock, but in practiced obedience. At the counter sits a man in a black suit, tattoos climbing his neck like vines reclaiming stone, hands folded around a cup he hasn't touched. He doesn't flinch, doesn't speak, doesn't look away. Sheriff Mark Gill had built his authority on moments like this, on silence that confirmed what he already believed, that no one would challenge him, that fear was loyalty, that a badge made him bulletproof in a town this small. He'd miscalculated what silence could mean. The stillness coming from the man at the counter wasn't submission, it was assessment. The desert doesn't forgive carelessness. It teaches through erosion, through slow collapse, through the kind of heat that warps metal and judgment alike. This town existed in that space between survival and surrender, a scatter of buildings clinging to a 2-lane highway that trucks used to bypass anywhere worth stopping. The diner sat like a confession at the edge of everything, its sign flickering with the rhythm of something dying slow. Inside, the air conditioning wheezed against the afternoon heat, and conversations happened in fragments, in voices trained not to carry past the booth they started in. Clara's cheek burns. Her eyes water, but she doesn't cry, won't give him that. She's 23, and has survived worse than a middle-aged man drunk on petty power, but this is different. This is public. This is witnessed. Her hand trembles as she reaches for the towel at her waist, but her body won't cooperate. The coffee pot is still in her grip, somehow, though half its contents now pool across the counter and drip between the cracks in the tile. You clumsy or just stupid? Gill's voice carries the casual cruelty of someone who's never been interrupted mid-sentence. He adjusts his belt, the leather creaking, his hand resting near the holster like it's part of the performance. I asked for a refill. Didn't say redecorate my goddamn uniform. There are maybe 15 people in the diner. A couple in the corner booth who suddenly find their pancakes fascinating. 2 truckers at a window table who study the parking lot like it holds answers. A woman with a toddler who pulls her child closer and whispers something about leaving soon. The cook, a man named Ray who's worked here 20 years, stares through the kitchen window but doesn't move, doesn't speak. The waitress at the far end, an older woman named Jolene, wipes down a table that's already clean. No one intervenes. No one ever does. Clara forces herself to breathe, forces the apology out even though it tastes like bile. I'm sorry, Sheriff. I'll get you a towel. Damn right you will. Gill pulls a napkin from the dispenser and dabs at the few drops on his sleeve with theatrical disgust. And you'll pay for the dry cleaning. Minimum wage doesn't excuse incompetence. The man at the counter still hasn't moved. He sits 3 seats down from where Gill stands, positioned at an angle that lets him see the entire room without turning his head. His suit is expensive, tailored, black, no tie. The kind of clothing that doesn't belong in a place like this. His dark hair is slicked back, showing the clean lines of his face, the sharp angles of his jaw. But it's the tattoos that draw attention. Ink crawls up from his collar in intricate patterns, symbols, and script, in a language Clara doesn't recognize. His hands rest on the counter, and she can see more tattoos there, across his knuckles, disappearing under his sleeves. He looks like he walked out of a different world and into theirs by accident. Gill notices him now, really notices. The sheriff's gaze slides from Clara to the stranger, and something shifts in his expression. Not fear, not yet, but the cautious calculation of a predator encountering something unfamiliar in his territory. You got a problem? Gill's voice is louder now, projecting, performing for an audience that pretends not to watch. The man doesn't answer immediately. He lifts his coffee cup slowly, deliberately, and takes a sip, sets it back down with the same measured control. When he finally speaks, his voice is quiet, calm, the kind of calm that makes people lean in to hear. No problem. 2 words. That's all. But the way he says them without deference, without fear, without the reflexive submission this town has learned, makes the air in the room change. The silence deepens. Even the hum of the air conditioning seems to hold its breath. Gill's jaw tightens. He's used to fear presenting itself immediately, like a tax everyone pays without question. This man isn't paying. Then mind your damn business. Gil turns back to Clara, dismissing the stranger with the confidence of someone who's never been genuinely threatened. Towel! Now! Clara moves on autopilot, her hands still shaking as she grabs a clean towel from under the counter. She approaches Gil carefully, the way you'd approach a dog that's already bitten once. He snatches the towel from her hand without thanks, scrubbing at his sleeve with unnecessary violence. The man at the counter watches. Not Clara, not the sheriff. He watches the room. The exits, the mounted camera in the corner that hasn't worked in 3 years, the window that looks out onto the parking lot where Gil's cruiser sits at an arrogant angle across 2 spaces. He's cataloging, memorizing, building a map of something only he can see. Gil tosses the towel back at Clara. It hits her chest and falls to the floor. Clean this mess up. And stay out of my way. He walks toward the door, boots heavy on the tile, radio crackling at his hip with some distant emergency he won't respond to. At the threshold, he pauses, looks back at the man in black one more time. The stranger meets his gaze, doesn't blink, doesn't smile, just looks at him with the patient attention of someone who has all the time in the world. Gil leaves. The door swings shut behind him. His cruiser starts with an aggressive rumble. The diner exhales. Clara kneels to pick up the towel, her hands still trembling, her cheeks still burning. When she stands, the man at the counter is looking at her now. Really looking. Not with pity. Not with the performative concern that means nothing. He's looking at her the way someone looks at evidence, at a problem that needs solving. She meets his eyes for just a moment before looking away, but in that moment, she sees something that terrifies and steadies her in equal measure. He saw everything, and he's not going to forget. The diner empties faster than usual after Gil leaves. The couple in the corner booth pays in silence, leaving their half-eaten pancakes congealing on the plate. The truckers drop cash on their table and disappear into the parking lot without waiting for change. Within 10 minutes, the only people left are Ray in the kitchen, Jolene wiping tables that don't need wiping, and the man in the black suit who still hasn't moved from his position at the counter. Clara's hands shake as she mops up the spilled coffee. The smell of it burnt, bitter, makes her stomach turn. Or maybe that's just the adrenaline draining from her system, leaving her hollow and nauseous. She can still feel the impact of Gil's hand against her cheek, the sharp sting that settled into a dull, throbbing heat. She wants to check her reflection, see if there's a mark, but she won't give anyone the satisfaction of watching her examine the damage. 6 days. She's been in this town for 6 days. The calculation runs through her mind on a loop, the same math that brought her here in the first place. Rent due in 3 weeks, $72 in her bank account. A 15-year-old Honda with a check engine light that's been on for 6 months. No references, no safety net, no one who'd notice if she disappeared tomorrow. The diner owner, a man named Pete, with tired eyes, and the permanently stooped shoulders of someone who's given up on most things, had hired her because she showed up. That was it. That was the entire job interview. She'd walked in, asked if they were hiring, and Pete had looked her over with the resigned assessment of someone who knew beggars couldn't be choosers. "You got experience?" he'd asked. Yes. A lie, but not a big one. She'd worked a register at a gas station for 3 months before it closed. That counted for something. "You show up on time?" "Yes." "Then you start tomorrow, 7 a.m. Don't be late." That was 6 days ago. Before she learned that Sheriff Gil ate breakfast here every morning at 8:30. Before she learned that when his coffee cup got below half full, you refilled it without being asked. Before she learned that mistakes, even small ones, even accidents, had consequences that left marks. Jolene appears beside her with a spray bottle and fresh towels. She's maybe 50, maybe 60, hard to tell with the kind of worn-down aging this desert does to people. She doesn't say anything, just starts wiping down the counter where the coffee spilled, her movements efficient and mechanical. "I'm sorry," Clara whispers. "I didn't mean to. Don't apologize to me." Jolene's voice is flat, empty of emotion. Not unkind, just absent. "It's done. Move on." "But I..." "Move on." Jolene meets her eyes briefly, and Clara sees something there that makes her throat tighten. Not sympathy, not anger, just exhausted recognition. The look of someone who stood exactly where Clara is standing and learned the hard way that talking about it doesn't help. Clara swallows hard and nods. She takes the dirty towels to the back, dumps them in the industrial sink, and stands there for a moment with her hands braced against the stainless steel. The kitchen is hot despite the laboring air conditioning. Ray is at the grill, scraping away at carbonized grease that's probably been there for years. He doesn't look at her, doesn't acknowledge her presence at all. That's when it really hits her. Not the slap itself, but the silence that follows. The way everyone in this building just watched a man in uniform strike a woman half his size and did absolutely nothing. Not because they didn't care, but because they'd learned that caring had a price they couldn't afford to pay. This isn't new. This isn't shocking. This is routine. When Clara returns to the front, the man in the black suit is still there. He's nursing the same cup of coffee, which must be cold by now. His posture hasn't changed, relaxed but alert, like a cat pretending to sleep, while actually tracking every movement in the room. She approaches cautiously, the way you'd approach anything unpredictable. "Can I get you anything else?" He looks at her then, really looks at her. His eyes are dark, almost black in the diner's fluorescent lighting, and there's an intensity to his gaze that makes her want to step back. But it's not threatening, it's assessing, like he's reading something written on her face that she didn't know was there. "How long have you worked here?" His voice is quiet, accented something European maybe, though Clara can't place it exactly. The question surprises her. "Almost a week. And him?" He doesn't gesture toward the door, doesn't need to. They both know who he means. Clara hesitates. Every instinct she's developed over the past 6 days screams at her not to answer. Don't gossip, don't complain, don't give anyone ammunition to use against you later. But something about this man, about the way he watched Gil, about the way he's watching her now, makes her feel like dishonesty would be more dangerous than truth. He comes in every morning. She keeps her voice low. Usually he's fine. I must have just caught him on a bad day. The man's expression doesn't change, but something in his eyes suggests he knows she's lying to herself, making excuses for someone who doesn't deserve them. He reaches into his jacket, a movement that makes Clara's heart jump, and pulls out his wallet. He places a $20 bill on the counter beside his coffee cup, the cup that cost $3. "Keep the change." He stands, adjusting his suit jacket with practiced ease. Up close, Clara can see more details of his tattoos. On his right hand, across his knuckles, letters in ornate script. On his neck, partially hidden by his collar, what looks like a bird, maybe a raven with its wings spread. "Thank you," Clara manages. He pauses, studying her face one more time. "That mark on your cheek will fade. Make sure you ice it when you get home." Then he's walking toward the door, moving with the kind of controlled grace that suggests training military. Maybe, or something else. Something that makes ordinary people look clumsy by comparison. The door closes behind him. Through the window, Clara watches him cross the parking lot to a black car she hadn't noticed before. Expensive, sleek, the kind of vehicle that belongs in a city, not a dying desert town. He doesn't leave immediately. He sits in the driver's seat, engine running, and makes a phone call. Clara touches her cheek, feels the heat still radiating from where Gil's hand connected. The stranger is still on the phone when she finally turns away. Ray and Macias had learned patience in places where impatience meant death, in rooms where the wrong word ended negotiations permanently, in territories where power was measured not by volume but by the space people gave you when you entered. He'd spent 20 years building an empire that operated in shadows, in whispers, in the kind of silence that made governments nervous and rivals careful. He hadn't planned to stop in this town. It was an accident of geography, a detour necessitated by road construction 50 miles back that had rerouted him through this forgotten stretch of desert. He'd needed coffee, needed to stretch his legs, needed a moment away from the enclosed space of his car and the thoughts that followed him everywhere lately. The diner had seemed as good a place as any. He'd been wrong about that. Now, sitting in his car with the engine idling and the air conditioning fighting against the afternoon heat, Rayan replayed the scene in his mind with the methodical precision of someone trained to notice details others missed. The sheriff's body language confident, entitled, performing for an audience he knew wouldn't challenge him. The girl's reaction fear mixed with something harder, something that suggested this wasn't her first encounter with violence. The room's collective response practiced invisibility, the kind that came from repetition. But it was the aftermath that interested him most. The way people had fled. The way the older waitress had moved in to help clean up without acknowledgement, without emotion, like she was servicing a machine rather than comforting a person. The way the cook had deliberately avoided eye contact. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was infrastructure. His phone call connects after 2 rings. Rayan. The voice on the other end belongs to Dmitri, his second in command, a man who'd followed him from Moscow to Chicago to Los Angeles, and never once questioned an order. Everything all right? I need information on a town. Rayan rattles off the name, though calling it a town feels generous. Specifically, I need background on the local sheriff. Mark Gill, G-I-L. There's a pause. The sound of fingers on a keyboard. That's random. We expanding into the middle of nowhere now? Just pull it. Rayan watches the diner through his windshield. The girl, Clara, he'd heard the other waitress call her, is visible through the window, moving between tables with the mechanical efficiency of someone trying to disappear into routine. Employment history, complaints, anything that shows a pattern. How deep? Deep enough to know who protects him. More typing. Dmitri knows better than to ask unnecessary questions, but Rayan can hear the curiosity in his silence. They've worked together long enough that Dmitri can read the temperature of Rayan's voice, can sense when something has shifted from business to personal. Give me 2 hours, Dmitri says finally. 1. Rayan, 1 hour. And Dmitri? Rayan shifts in his seat, his eyes still on the diner. Look into the town's mayor, county officials, anyone with authority. I want to know the chain. The line goes quiet for a moment. Then, you planning something? I'm planning to understand something. He ends the call. The truth is, Rayan had been looking for a reason. Not consciously, maybe, but the restlessness that had been building in him for months, the sense that the empire he'd built had become routine, predictable, empty of meaning, had been searching for an outlet. For something that mattered beyond profit margins and territory disputes. He'd watched the sheriff slap that girl and felt something he hadn't felt in years, genuine anger. Not the calculated anger he used in negotiations. Not the strategic fury he deployed to keep his people in line. This was clean and simple and almost refreshing in its clarity. Someone with power had abused it. Someone without power had suffered for it. And everyone who witnessed it had decided their own safety mattered more than basic human decency. Rayan understood that calculus. He'd built a career on it, but he'd always operated with a code. Even in the criminal underworld, you didn't hurt civilians. You didn't target the defenseless. You maintained certain lines because without them, you were just chaos in an expensive suit. This sheriff had no code, just a badge and the certainty that no one would stop him. That certainty was about to become expensive. Rayan starts the car but doesn't leave immediately. Instead, he drives slowly through the town's main street. Cataloging. A gas station with pumps that look older than he is. A general store with a "Help Wanted" sign that's faded to near illegibility. A post office. A bar called The Watering Hole with motorcycles parked outside and country music bleeding through closed doors. The sheriff's station is a low-slung brick building at the edge of town. American flag hanging limp in the still air. 2 cruisers in the parking lot. A couple of deputies visible through the windows, moving with the unhurried pace of people who know emergencies are rare and accountability even rarer. Rayan doesn't stop, doesn't slow down, just catalogs and continues. He finds a motel on the highway, the kind of place that rents rooms by the hour or the week with equal indifference. The clerk is a kid in his early 20s who barely looks up from his phone when Rayan approaches the desk. Need a room. 3 nights. Maybe more. The kid slides a registration card across the counter without interest. Cash or card? Cash. Rayan fills out the card with a name that isn't his, an address that doesn't exist, pays for a week up front because that's easier than committing to a timeline he doesn't have yet. The room is exactly what he expected, functional, depressing, clean to minimum standards. He doesn't unpack, just sets his bag on the bed and stands at the window, looking out at the highway and the desert beyond. His phone buzzes. A text from Dmitri. Preliminary results. You're not going to like this. Rayan calls him back. Talk to me. Mark Gill has been sheriff for 12 years. Before that, deputy for 8. He's got 17 formal complaints filed against him over the past decade. Excessive force, sexual harassment, unlawful arrest. Not one of them stuck. Why not? Because the county prosecutor is his brother-in-law. Because the mayor plays poker with him every Thursday. Because the state police have looked the other way every time someone escalated. Dimitri's voice carries the tone of someone reading from a script he's seen too many times before. It's a small town, Rayan. Everyone's connected. Everyone's complicit. Anyone ever challenge him? 3 people tried. 1 got run out of town on fabricated drug charges. 1 had their business mysteriously burned down. The 3rd one. Dmitri pauses. Disappeared. Never found. Rayan processes this in silence, watching the sun begin its slow descent toward the horizon. "Send me everything you have," he says finally. "And Dimitri, keep digging. I want to know every person he's hurt, every complaint that got buried, every witness who went silent." "Rayan, what are you doing?" "What I should have done the moment I watched it happen." He hangs up before Dimitri can argue. The sun is setting when Rayan returns to the diner, painting the desert in shades of rust and shadow. The neon sign flickers to life as he pulls into the parking lot, its dying bulbs casting uneven pools of pink and blue across the asphalt. There are fewer cars now. The dinner rush, in a town this size, means maybe 6 customers instead of 3. Clara is still working. He can see her through the window, refilling salt shakers with the concentrated focus of someone trying to make time pass faster. Her cheek has darkened where Gil struck her, the bruise blooming purple against her brown skin despite whatever ice she managed to apply. Rayan parks in the same spot he occupied earlier and walks inside. The bell above the door announces his arrival. Clara looks up, and for a moment something crosses her face. Not quite recognition, not quite relief, but something adjacent to both. She straightens, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "Coffee?" she asks, her voice carefully neutral. "Please." He takes the same seat at the counter, noting the changes since this afternoon. Different customers in the booths. Ray still in the kitchen, now working the dinner menu. Jolene replaced by a younger guy bussing tables with earbuds in, deliberately disconnected from everything around him. Clara pours the coffee with steady hands this time. Sets it in front of him along with cream and sugar he won't use. She's about to move away when he speaks. "How's your shift been?" The question is simple, almost mundane, but it stops her. People don't ask waitresses how their shift has been. They order, they eat, they leave. Personal questions are either intrusive or transactional, usually both. "Fine," she says automatically. Then, because something about his direct gaze makes lying feel pointless, quiet. "That's good." She nods, still uncertain what to do with this interaction. "Let me know if you need anything else." He watches her return to her side work, organizing menus that don't need organizing. She's good at making herself look busy, a survival skill he recognizes. The ability to appear productive while actually scanning for threats, planning exit routes, calculating the next move. The door opens. Rayan doesn't turn immediately, but he tracks the arrival in the window's reflection. Heavy boots, the jingle of keys and equipment, that particular brand of confident movement that comes from uniform and authority. Sheriff Mark Gill walks in like he owns the place. Maybe he does, in every way that matters. Gill's eyes sweep the diner, land on Rayan, and narrow slightly. The recognition is mutual now. The stranger who didn't flinch. The man who watched and said nothing but somehow said everything. Clara freezes at the coffee station, her shoulders tensing in a way that tells Rayan everything he needs to know about how the rest of her shift has been. Not fine, not quiet, just waiting for this moment. "Evening, Clara." Gil's voice carries false warmth, the kind of friendliness that's really a warning. "Thought you'd have learned your lesson by now, but here you are, still employed. Pete must be desperate." She doesn't respond, keeps her eyes down, her hands busy with tasks that don't exist. Gil takes a booth near the window, not his usual breakfast spot, but positioned so he can see everyone who enters or leaves. He drapes his arm across the back of the vinyl seat, proprietary and relaxed. "Coffee. And make sure it actually makes it to the table this time." Rayan sips his own coffee. Waits. Clara approaches Gil's table with a fresh pot, her movements carefully controlled. She pours without incident, sets the pot down, starts to retreat. "Hold on." Gil's hand shoots out, catches her wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop her. Firm enough to establish control. "I didn't say you could leave." The diner goes quiet. The busboy pulls out his earbuds. Ray appears in the kitchen window. The handful of customers find sudden interest in their phones, their food, anything but the scene unfolding 3 feet away. "Sheriff, I have other customers." Clara's voice is steady, but Rayan can see the tension in her jaw. "They can wait." Gil's thumb presses against her wrist, almost casual, almost gentle. The threat is in the ease of it, the assumption that he can touch her whenever he wants. "We need to talk about your attitude problem. See, I've been asking around. Turns out you're new in town. No family here, no references. Makes a man wonder what you're running from." "I'm not running from anything." "Everyone's running from something, sweetheart." He releases her wrist but doesn't break eye contact. "You want to keep this job, you better learn some respect. Starting with remembering who keeps this town safe. Who makes sure people like you can work without worrying about the wrong element coming through? Ryan sets his coffee cup down. The sound is quiet, but in the silence of the diner it carries. Gil's attention shifts. Something on your mind, friend? Not your friend. Ryan's voice is calm, conversational. And yes, I think you should apologize to her. The words land like stones in still water. Gil's expression shifts through several emotions: surprise, confusion, then something uglier. He releases Clara and stands, his hand instinctively moving to his belt, to the holstered weapon there, not drawing it, just reminding everyone it exists. Excuse me? For this morning, for just now, for making her job harder than it needs to be. Rayan doesn't stand, doesn't raise his voice, just maintains that same level eye contact that unnerved Gil earlier. An apology. Simple. Gil laughs, but there's no humor in it. You've got balls, I'll give you that. You know who you're talking to? I know exactly who I'm talking to. Then you know I don't apologize to minimum wage help who can't do their jobs right. Rayan tilts his head slightly, considering. Then maybe you're not as smart as you think you are. The temperature in the room drops. Gil's jaw clenches, his hand now fully gripping his belt near the holster. You threatening a law enforcement officer? I'm suggesting basic human decency. If you hear that as a threat, that says more about you than me. Gil moves toward Rayan's position at the counter. He's a big man, 6'2", maybe 220, used to using his size to intimidate. He stops close enough that Rayan would have to look up to maintain eye contact if he were anyone else, but Rayan doesn't look up, doesn't lean back, doesn't give ground. You're new here, Gil says quietly, voice low enough that only Rayan and Clara can hear. So maybe you don't understand how things work. Let me educate you. In this town, I am the law. What I say goes. And I say you need to mind your own goddamn business before you find yourself in a situation you can't walk away from. Is that a threat? Rayan asks mildly. It's a fact. Rayan finally stands. He's not quite as tall as Gil, but the way he carries himself makes height irrelevant. There's something in his posture, something coiled and patient that makes Gil's confidence waver for just a second. Here's another fact, Rayan says quietly. You put your hands on people because you've never met anyone who'd make you regret it. That stops today. Gil's face flushes red. His hand moves to Rayan's chest, shoving hard. You son of a... Rayan doesn't stumble. The push might as well have hit a wall. You just assaulted me, Rayan says calmly, in front of witnesses. You want to compound that mistake? Or are we done here? For a long moment Gil stands there, his breathing heavy, his fists clenched. The diner holds its breath. Then Gil smiles, cold and cruel. We're done. For now. But you and me? We're going to have a longer conversation real soon. Count on it. He walks out, letting the door slam behind him. The silence that follows is different from before. Not frozen. Not passive. Uncertain. Clara approaches slowly. You shouldn't have done that. Rayan meets her eyes. Probably not. He'll come after you now. I know. Then why? Because someone should have done it this morning, Rayan says simply. He places another 20 on the counter. Stay safe, Clara. He leaves before she can respond, walking into the desert night where Gil's cruiser sits idling in the parking lot, waiting. Rayan doesn't make it back to the motel. Gil's cruiser follows him for exactly 2 miles, lights off, maintaining a predatory distance that's meant to intimidate. Rayan watches in the rearview mirror, tracking the headlights, calculating. He could lose him. The car he's driving has twice the horsepower of a standard police cruiser, and Rayan knows evasive driving the way most people know their morning commute. But he doesn't run. Running would delay the inevitable, and Rayan has never been interested in delay when confrontation serves better. The lights come on 3 miles outside town, red and blue strobing across the empty desert highway. Rayan pulls over smoothly, engine idling, hands visible on the steering wheel. He watches in the mirror as Gil exits the cruiser, hand resting on his weapon, approaching with the exaggerated caution of someone creating a narrative. The tap on the window is aggressive. Rayan rolls it down. License and registration. Gil's voice is flat, professional now. He's switched modes from bully to cop, and Rayan recognizes the performance. This is the version that goes in reports, the version that justifies whatever comes next. What's the reason for the stop, Sheriff? Broken taillight, license and registration. Now, Rayan's taillights aren't broken. Both of them verified that fact in his mirror before Gil's lights came on. But arguing won't help. He reaches slowly for the glove compartment, telegraphing every movement, and produces the registration. The license he pulls from his wallet is legitimate, one of 3 he carries, each equally real, each connected to a different identity. Gil examines both documents with theatrical scrutiny, his flashlight beam sweeping across the interior of the car. Rayan Macias. Long way from Los Angeles, Mr. Macias. Passing through. And the attitude back at the diner that how you talk to law enforcement in California? I don't talk to law enforcement in California the way you talk to civilians in your town. Wrong answer. Rayan knows it even as he says it, but the truth is he's tired of performing deference for men who've earned none, tired of watching people with badges treat authority like permission. Gil's jaw tightens. Step out of the vehicle. On what grounds? On the grounds that I'm telling you to. Step out. Now. Rayan complies, moving with deliberate slowness. The desert night is cool against his skin, the highway empty in both directions. No witnesses except the stars and the sheriff who's learning to regret his certainty. Turn around. Hands on the vehicle. Rayan does. The pat-down is rougher than necessary, Gil's hands checking for weapons with more force than procedure requires. He finds nothing Rayan doesn't carry in situations like this, doesn't need to. You're under arrest for assault on a law enforcement officer, resisting arrest and disorderly conduct. I didn't touch you. You threatened me. In front of witnesses. Gil pulls Rayan's arms behind his back, cuffs clicking into place. Too tight. Deliberately too tight. Witnesses who'll testify to exactly what I tell them to testify to. The drive to the station happens in silence. Rayan sits in the back of the cruiser, wrists burning where the metal bites, watching the town materialize out of darkness. Gil parks at the station and hauls Rayan inside with unnecessary force, past a deputy who looks up from his computer and then quickly looks away. The booking process is textbook harassment. Fingerprints taken with hands shoved roughly against the scanner. Mugshot taken with Gil, accidentally jostling him between frames. Personal effects cataloged with theatrical slowness wallet. Phone, keys, watch. You get one phone call, Gil says, dumping Rayan's belongings into a plastic bag. Make it count. They put him in a holding cell that smells of industrial cleaner and desperation. Concrete walls, metal bench, toilet in the corner with no privacy. Rayan has been in worse places, much worse, but there's something particularly degrading about small-town authority flexing its limited muscles. He sits on the bench and waits. Gil appears at the bars 20 minutes later, coffee in hand, that same cruel smile on his face. Comfortable? Rayan doesn't respond. See, here's how this works. You're going to spend the night here. Tomorrow morning you'll see the judge who happens to be a good friend of mine. He'll set bail at whatever I suggest. Could be 5,000. Could be 50. Then you'll probably sit here another few days before your court date, because the bail bondsman in this county takes weekends off. And when you finally do get to court, you'll have a choice. Plead guilty, pay your fine, and get the hell out of my town. Or fight it, and spend the next 6 months coming back here while we drag this out, until you run out of money or patience. He sips his coffee, savoring the moment. Either way, you learn that you don't fuck with me in my town. You don't question my authority. And you definitely don't defend some waitress who isn't worth the trouble. Rayan finally speaks. I'd like to make my phone call now. Gil's smile widens. Sure, let me get you a phone. He disappears and returns with an ancient landline on a long cord. Sets it on the floor just outside the bars, close enough that Rayan can reach through, but far enough to make it awkward. Local calls only. You got 3 minutes. Rayan reaches through the bars, lifts the receiver, and dials from memory. It rings twice. Rayan. Dimitri's voice is instantly alert despite the late hour. Where are you? In a holding cell. Desert town I told you about. Rayan keeps his voice calm, aware that Gil is standing 6 feet away, listening. I need you to make some calls. What kind of calls? The kind that involve federal authorities and very detailed financial records. Rayan meets Gil's eyes through the bars. Sheriff's name is Mark Gil. I want everything: bank accounts, property records, arrest statistics, use of force complaints, cross-reference with every person of authority in this county. Mayor, prosecutor, judges. I want the entire chain of corruption documented and ready to deliver. Gil's smile falters slightly. How long do I have? Dimitri asks. 48 hours. And Dimitri? Make sure it's airtight. Federal prosecutor level. The kind of evidence that doesn't require local cooperation. Done. You need extraction? No. I need to be exactly where I am. You're playing a dangerous game. I'm playing the only game that matters. Rayan glances at Gil again. Call my attorney. Tell him I'm being held on fabricated charges and to expect retaliation. then start building the case. He hangs up before Dimitri can argue. Gil's expression has shifted from smug to uncertain. Who the hell are you? Someone who knows how systems work. Rayanne sits back on the bench, perfectly calm. You built your power on the assumption that no one would ever have the resources or motivation to challenge you properly. That assumption just became expensive. You're bluffing. You're some LA tough guy who bit off more than he can chew. Maybe. Or maybe I'm someone who spent 20 years learning exactly how to dismantle men like you. Rayanne crosses his arms. I guess we'll find out. Gil stands there for another moment, his confidence cracking at the edges. Then he turns and walks away, his boots echoing down the corridor. Alone in the cell, Rayanne closes his eyes. Before Gil locked him up, before the cuffs, before the confrontation at the diner, Rayanne had made one stop, back at the motel, long enough to retrieve something from his bag and make a different kind of call, the kind that set other wheels in motion. Clara had said he shouldn't have intervened. She was right. But some things matter more than should. Morning breaks cold and gray over the desert, the kind of dawn that offers no promises. Clara wakes in her studio apartment, if you can call a converted storage room behind the motel, an apartment with her cheek still throbbing. She touches the bruise gently, feels the tender heat of it, and thinks about the man in the black suit sitting in a cell because he told a sheriff to apologize. She should feel guilty. She does feel guilty. But underneath that guilt runs something else, something she hasn't felt in the 6 days since she arrived in this town. The faint possibility that silence isn't the only option. Her shift starts at 7. She's never been late, never called in sick, never given Pete a reason to regret hiring her. Reliability is the only currency she has, and she spends it carefully. But this morning, she takes a detour before work. The diner owner lives above the restaurant in a small apartment that's probably violating a dozen health codes. Clara has never been up there, but she knows Pete arrives early to prep, so she waits at the back door until she hears movement inside. When he appears gray-haired, unshaven, already looking exhausted at 6:45 a.m., she catches the door before it closes. Clara? What are you? I need to talk to you. About yesterday. Pete's expression shudders immediately. There's nothing to talk about. It's handled. It's not handled. That man who stood up to Gil? He's in jail right now because of me. Because of himself. Pete corrects, moving past her to unlock the main dining room. He made his choice. Not your problem, but it is my problem. Clara follows him inside, watching as he starts the coffee machines, flips on lights, begins the mechanical routine of opening. Pete, how many times has Gil done this? Hit someone, threatened someone. How many times have you just let it happen? Pete stops, his hand frozen on the coffee filter. For a long moment he doesn't move, doesn't turn around. When he finally speaks, his voice is hollow. You want the honest answer? I stopped counting at 20. Maybe more. Women mostly, but not always. Anyone he decides deserves it. The number hits Clara like a physical thing. 20 people. 20 moments like yesterday. 20 bruises, humiliations, violations that everyone just accepted as the cost of living here. And nobody ever reported it? Oh, people reported it. Pete turns to face her now, and Clara sees something in his eyes she hasn't seen before, not fear exactly, but the exhausted resignation that comes after fear has burned itself out. 3 years ago, a woman filed a formal complaint. Gil arrested her son on drug charges 2 days later. The charges stuck because the drugs were real. Gil planted them during a traffic stop, but try proving that. The kid's still in prison. Clara's stomach turns. 5 years before that, a businessman from out of town tried to sue after Gil broke his arm during an arrest. The man's store burned down a week later. Electrical fire, they said. No evidence of arson. He left town and dropped the lawsuit. Pete returns to the coffee prep, his movements mechanical. You learn real quick that fighting back costs more than staying quiet, so we just let him do whatever he wants? We survive. That's what we do. We keep our heads down and we survive. Pete finally looks at her directly. Clara, you seem like a good kid. You need this job, I can tell. Don't throw it away for some stranger who'll be gone the moment he makes bail. What if he's not a stranger? What if he's the first person who actually tried to do something? Then he's a fool. Pete's voice is gentle but firm. And if you're smart, you'll let this go. But Clara doesn't let it go. She works her shift in a daze, pouring coffee and taking orders while her mind races. During her break, she does something she's been avoiding since the slap happened. She pulls out her phone and opens the camera. The diner has security cameras, ancient things that haven't worked in years, but her phone works fine. The footage is shaky. She'd been holding the coffee pot, not the phone, but it captured the moment, the sound of the slap, her staggering backward, Gil's satisfied expression, and in the background, barely visible but present, the man at the counter watching everything. Evidence. Real, documented evidence. She stares at the screen for a long time, her thumb hovering over the delete button. This is the smart move. Delete it. Forget it. Survive. But she doesn't delete it. At noon, during the lunch rush, the diner door opens and a deputy walks in. Not Gil, a younger guy Clara has seen around but never spoken to. He orders coffee and a sandwich and sits at the counter, and Clara notices his hands are shaking slightly as he pulls out his phone. She brings him his order. "Everything okay, officer?" He looks up, startled, and for a second she sees something in his face: conflict, maybe, uncertainty. "Yeah, fine, just thinking." He doesn't elaborate, but when Clara returns to refill his coffee 20 minutes later, she notices he's pulled up something on his phone. A document. Lots of text. Before he can close it, she catches a few words. Complaint. Excessive force. Deputy James Wilson, reporting. Their eyes meet. "How's your cheek?" he asks quietly. Clara touches it reflexively. "It'll heal." It shouldn't have happened in the first place. Deputy Wilson sets his phone face down on the counter. "I've worked under Gil for 3 years. Watched him do things that make what happened to you look tame. Never said anything because I wanted to keep my job, keep my head down. And now? Now some guy I've never met is sitting in a cell because he had the balls to say what I should have said 100 times over." Wilson pulls out his wallet, drops cash on the counter. "Makes me wonder what kind of cop that makes me." He stands to leave, then pauses. "There's a state police barracks 40 miles north. They take complaints against local departments. Just in case you wanted to know that." He's gone before Clara can respond. The lunch shift ends. The dinner shift begins. Clara works through both, her mind spinning. At 7 p.m., Jolene arrives for the closing shift and immediately notices something's different. "You're thinking too loud," the older waitress observes, tying on her apron. "Whatever it is, stop." "When Gil hit me yesterday," Clara says carefully, "were you scared?" Jolene's expression doesn't change. "Always scared. That's the point. But you helped me anyway. Brought towels, helped clean up. That's different. That's just being decent. Is it?" Clara meets her eyes. "Or is it the first step toward not being scared?" Jolene studies her for a long moment. Then, so quietly Clara almost misses it. "I have video too. From 2 years ago. Different girl. Same shit. Kept it because, I don't know why. Insurance, maybe. Proof that I wasn't crazy. That it really happened the way I remembered." "Did you ever show anyone?" "Who would I show? His brother-in-law, the prosecutor? The mayor who plays poker with him?" Jolene's voice is bitter. "There's no one to tell, Clara. That's the whole problem." "There is now," Clara says. "That man Gil arrested. He's not from here. He doesn't answer to the same people. He's also in a cell. For now." Something shifts in Jolene's expression. Not hope exactly, but the ghost of something that might become hope if fed properly. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that maybe if enough people stop being silent at the same time, the silence stops protecting him." Clara pulls out her phone, opens the video, shows it to Jolene. "I'm thinking that Deputy Wilson is writing a complaint, that you have video from 2 years ago, that there are probably others. And you want to what? Start a revolution?" "I want to stop pretending this is normal." Clara's voice is steady now, certain. "That man in the cell made me a promise before Gil arrested him. He said, 'This ends if you don't lie.' So I'm not going to lie anymore. Not to myself. Not to anyone." Jolene stares at the phone screen, at the frozen image of Gil's hand connecting with Clara's face. When she looks up, her eyes are wet. "I know 3 other women," she says quietly. 3 others who have stories, evidence. One of them kept the medical records from the ER. Will they talk? Maybe, if they think it'll actually matter this time. Jolene wipes her eyes roughly. "But Clara, you need to understand what you're starting. Gil won't just let this go. He'll come after everyone involved." "I know. And you're willing to risk that?" Clara thinks about the man in the black suit, about his calm certainty that systems could be challenged if you understood them well enough, about the way he stood up when no one else would. "I'm willing to try," she says. By closing time, Clara has 4 names. 4 women who experienced what she experienced. 4 potential witnesses who've kept their silence for years because silence was safer than truth. She texts each of them the same message. There's a chance to make this right. Are you interested? 3 respond yes, within an hour. The 4th takes longer, but eventually, near midnight, Clara's phone buzzes. What do you need me to do? In his cell, Rayan Mafia sleeps with the practiced ease of someone who knows patience is a weapon. He doesn't know about the videos, the complaints, the women finding their voices in the dark, but he knows something has shifted. He can feel it in the way the deputy who brought him dinner wouldn't meet his eyes. In the way Gil hasn't returned to gloat. Silence is moving, and when silence moves, everything else follows. Rayan is released at 8:47 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, without explanation or apology. The deputy who processes him out, the same one who brought him dinner, the one whose hands shook, avoids eye contact as he returns Rayan's belongings. Wallet, phone, keys, watch, everything accounted for. Nothing missing. Professional courtesy extended 24 hours too late. Charges dropped? Rayan asks, pocketing his phone. Prosecutor declined to file. The deputy's voice is carefully neutral. You're free to go. Where's Sheriff Gil? Not here. Rayan studies the younger man for a moment, reading the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he's not saying more than required. Something changed overnight, something significant enough to make charges disappear and sheriffs scarce. Deputy Wilson, Rayan says, reading the nameplate. Thank you for dinner last night. Wilson's eyes flick up briefly, and in that glance Rayan sees confirmation of what he suspected. This one is different. This one has a conscience that hasn't been completely buried under uniform and convenience. Just doing my job, Wilson says. No, Rayan corrects gently. You did more than that. He leaves before Wilson can respond, stepping out into desert sunlight that feels sharp after a night in fluorescent captivity. His car is in the impound lot adjacent to the station, another petty punishment, another attempt to make his life difficult. It takes 40 minutes and $200 in administrative fees to retrieve it. By the time Rayan reaches the motel, it's nearly 10 a.m. His phone has been buzzing continuously since he powered it on Dimitri, his attorney, 2 business associates who don't know where he is and are starting to worry. He ignores them all and opens his laptop instead. The email from Dimitri is waiting, marked urgent, containing 6 attached files. Rayan reads for an hour, his expression never changing, his coffee growing cold beside him. When he's finished, he sits back and allows himself a thin smile. Dimitri has been thorough, devastatingly thorough. Mark Gill's financial records show deposits that don't match his sheriff's salary, regular payments from 3 local businesses, all documented, all traceable. His arrest records show a pattern of selective enforcement. Drug charges disproportionately filed against people who'd previously filed complaints. Use of force incidents that spike whenever county elections approach, creating a narrative of tough-on-crime that plays well with certain voters, but it's the cross-referencing that makes the case elegant. The county prosecutor, Gill's brother-in-law, has his own irregularities. Cases dismissed without explanation. Evidence mysteriously lost. A conviction rate that's statistically impossible without either corruption or divine intervention. The mayor owns property purchased at suspiciously low prices from people who were subsequently run out of town. A county judge has financial ties to the same businesses paying Gill. It's not just one corrupt sheriff. It's an ecosystem. Rayan forwards the files to his attorney with instructions. Prepare federal complaints. Identify the appropriate agencies. Make sure everything is documented with the kind of precision that survives legal challenges. Then he makes another call. It's done, Dimitri says before Rayan can speak. Federal prosecutor's office received an anonymous tip this morning. Very detailed, very well documented. They're sending investigators. How long? They're already en route. Should arrive this afternoon. Dimitri pauses. Rayan, what the hell did you step into out there? Small-town corruption? Textbook case. Nobody mobilizes federal investigators over small-town corruption. They do when the corruption involves civil rights violations, financial crimes, and a pattern of abuse extensive enough to justify RICO charges. Rayan stands, looking out the motel window at the town he's about to dismantle. They do when someone hands them a gift-wrapped case that makes their conviction rate look good. This is about the Waitress, isn't it? Rayan doesn't answer directly. This is about removing protections from people who've been protected too long. What happens after that is just gravity. He ends the call and drives back to the diner. Clara is working the lunch shift, moving between tables with the same controlled efficiency. But something about her is different today. Her posture is straighter. When she sees Rayan walk in, relief flashes across her face before she can hide it. "You're out," she says, approaching his usual seat at the counter. Charges dropped. Rayan sits, noting the other changes in the diner. Jolene is here, watching him with calculating eyes. Deputy Wilson sits in a booth, technically off-duty but present in a way that feels intentional. "Seems I'm not as much trouble as the sheriff thought." Clara pours coffee without being asked. "He hasn't been in today. First time in 3 years he's missed his morning routine. He's busy." Rayan sips the coffee. "People tend to get busy when their world starts falling apart." "What did you do?" "I made some phone calls, asked some questions, connected some dots." He meets her eyes. "But I'm not the only one doing that, am I?" Clara glances toward Jolene, then back to Rayan. 4 women came forward yesterday. With evidence, videos, medical records, witness statements. Deputy Wilson filed an internal complaint that went to state police instead of the county. Smart. Your attorney also received an anonymous package this morning. Documentation of everything Gil has done for the past 5 years. We didn't know where else to send it. Rayan allows himself a genuine smile. My attorney knows what to do with information like that. The diner door opens. 3 men in dark suits enter FBI, though they don't announce it. Their presence is enough. They scan the room with professional detachment, then approach the counter where a nervous Pete has appeared from the kitchen. "We're looking for Sheriff Mark Gill," the lead agent says, showing credentials. "We were told he frequents this establishment." Pete's voice shakes slightly. "Usually does. Hasn't been in today. We'll wait." The agent's eyes sweep across Rayan, pause for a fraction of a second, then move on. Professional courtesy between people who recognize what the other is, even without introduction. They take a booth, order coffee, settle in with the patient confidence of people who know their target will eventually surface. Rayan watches this unfold with quiet satisfaction. The ecosystem is collapsing faster than he anticipated. Gil's allies are probably making their own phone calls right now, hiring attorneys, creating distance, preparing to claim ignorance. His phone buzzes. A text from Dimitri. "Mayor just announced he's not seeking re-election. Prosecutor's office issued statement about routine review of past cases. They're abandoning ship." Rayan types back. "Good. Let them run. Makes the investigation easier." Clara refills his coffee, her hand steady now. What happens next? Federal investigators interview witnesses, build a case. Gil and anyone connected to him either cooperate or face charges. Rayan keeps his voice low enough that only she can hear. "The system you thought was fixed against you? It works when you bypass the corrupted parts and go straight to the people with actual authority. And you knew how to do that. I've had practice navigating systems that don't want to be navigated." She studies him for a long moment. "Who are you really?" "Someone who doesn't like bullies. It's not an answer, but it's true enough. Someone who has resources and knows how to use them when something matters." This mattered? Yes. The simple certainty in his voice makes Clara's eyes bright. She blinks rapidly, turns away before emotion can overwhelm her professional composure. When she turns back, she's composed again. "Thank you," she says quietly. "Don't thank me yet. The investigation takes time. Gil won't go quietly." As if summoned by the mention of his name, the radio on Deputy Wilson's belt crackles to life. Wilson answers, listens, his expression growing grim. The entire diner watches as he stands and approaches the FBI agents. "Sheriff Gil just turned himself in," Wilson says. "At the state police barracks. Not the county station. His attorney's with him." The lead FBI agent nods, unsurprised. Smart move. Probably hoping cooperation buys him leniency. He stands, his partners following. "We'll head there now." "Thank you, Deputy." They leave as efficiently as they arrived. The diner exhales collectively. Pete emerges fully from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. Did that just happen? Did Mark Gill just turn himself in? His attorney probably explained the mathematics. Rayan says, "Fight and lose everything, or cooperate and maybe keep his freedom. Men like Gill are cowards at their core. They only fight when they think they'll win." Clara leans against the counter, something like wonder in her voice. "It's really over. The criminal case is just beginning." "But his power?" Rayan meets her eyes. That ended the moment people stopped being afraid of him. Everything after that is just paperwork. Outside, the desert sun beats down on a town that's starting to realize the man who ruled it for 12 years just became a defendant. Phones are ringing. Conversations are happening. The ecosystem Gil built is discovering what happens when the keystone gets removed. Everything collapses. And Rayan Macias, the man in the black suit with tattoos climbing his neck, sits at a diner counter drinking coffee, while the world he quietly dismantled falls apart exactly as planned. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just removes the floor and watches gravity do the rest. The federal investigators work quickly. Within 72 hours, they've interviewed 23 witnesses, subpoenaed financial records from 4 county officials, and built a case that transforms whispered complaints into documented evidence. The town watches this unfold with a mixture of disbelief and cautious hope. Like people who've lived in darkness so long they're not sure they can trust the light, Rayan remains in town, a quiet presence at the diner each morning. He doesn't insert himself into the investigation, doesn't need to. The machine he set in motion is self-sustaining now, fed by years of buried truth finally breaking surface. On the 4th day, Clara arrives for her shift to find the parking lot crowded with vehicles she doesn't recognize. News vans from stations 2 hours away. Reporters with cameras and microphones positioned outside the county courthouse across the street. The story has outgrown the town's ability to contain it. Inside the diner, business is strange. Half the customers are locals who've lived here for decades, processing the revelation that their sheriff wasn't just difficult but criminal. The other half are outsiders, journalists, legal observers, people drawn by the spectacle of institutional collapse. Pete moves through the chaos with shell-shocked efficiency, pouring coffee and taking orders while his entire understanding of how things work undergoes revision. Jolene works the floor with grim satisfaction, and when a reporter tries to interview her, she points to Clara. Talk to her. She's the one who started this. Clara doesn't want to talk to reporters, doesn't want her face on television or her name in articles, but when the young woman with the microphone approaches professional, respectful, genuinely interested in the story, something inside Clara shifts. For 12 years, Gil's victims stayed silent because speaking felt dangerous and pointless. But maybe that's exactly why speaking matters now. He slapped me for spilling coffee, Clara says simply, standing outside the diner with the camera pointed at her face. And when someone told him to apologize, he arrested that person instead. That's who Mark Gill is. That's who he's always been. The interview airs that evening on 3 different stations. By morning, the story has gone regional. The courthouse hearing happens on a gray Thursday afternoon. Gill appears in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, the uniform and badge that gave him power replaced by the costume of the accused. His attorney, expensive, brought in from Phoenix, argues for bail reduction, for house arrest, for any accommodation that acknowledges his client's years of public service. The federal prosecutor presents a different narrative. 17 documented cases of excessive force, financial irregularities totaling nearly $200,000. A pattern of retaliation against anyone who challenged his authority. Witness testimony from women who'd stayed silent for years because they knew the system was designed to protect him, not them. The judge, a federal appointee with no local connections, listens to both sides with the patient attention of someone who's heard every excuse and isn't impressed by any of them. Bail is denied, she says finally. The defendant poses a flight risk and a potential danger to witnesses. He will remain in federal custody pending trial. Gil's face goes pale. His attorney whispers something urgent. But the decision is final, the gavel already falling. In the gallery, Clara sits between Jolene and Deputy Wilson, watching the man who terrorized them for years become just another defendant in an orange jumpsuit. She feels Wilson's hand squeeze hers briefly. Solidarity, recognition, shared relief. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarm. Clara ignores most of them, but she catches sight of Rayan standing at the edge of the crowd, watching but not participating. Their eyes meet across the distance, and he nods once. Permission to leave. Acknowledgement that her part in this is done. But the story isn't finished yet. The mayor announces his resignation that evening, citing health reasons that everyone knows are legal reasons. The county prosecutor recuses himself from all cases involving Gill or his associates, and the state attorney general's office announces they're reviewing every conviction Gill was involved with for the past decade. It's not just one man falling. It's an entire structure of corruption being dismantled piece by piece, and everyone who benefited from that structure scrambling to distance themselves before they're buried in the rubble. Pete closes the diner early that night, first time in 20 years. Not because business is slow, but because he needs to process what just happened. He sits in a booth with Clara, Jolene, and Ray, 4 people who've worked in this building long enough to remember when Gill was just a deputy, before power made him cruel. I should have done something, Pete says finally, his voice rough. Years ago, First time I saw him hurt someone. I should have reported it. Fought back. Something. We all should have, Jolene says quietly. But we didn't because we were afraid. And we were right to be afraid. Look what happened to people who tried. Doesn't make it right. No, but it makes it human. Clara looks at each of them in turn. We're doing something now. That has to count for something. Ray, who's barely spoken 3 words since this started, finally breaks his silence. That man, the one in the suit. He knew what to do, how to fight someone like Gil the right way. He had resources we didn't, Pete points out. No, Clara shakes her head. He had knowledge, and he shared it. Told us who to call, what to document, how to bypass the corrupted parts of the system. We could have done that ourselves if we'd known. So now we know, Jolene says. For next time, for anyone else who needs it. They sit in the dim diner. 4 people who survived something they shouldn't have had to survive, making quiet promises about the future, about being the kind of witnesses who don't look away, about building something better from the rubble of what was. Outside, the desert night settles over a town that's learning what comes after silence ends. It's not celebration. Not yet. It's the slow, painful work of healing. The trial is set for 6 weeks out, but Clara knows she won't be here to see it. The diner job was always temporary, survival money while she figured out what came next. What comes next isn't here. She gives Pete 2 weeks' notice on a Monday morning, and he accepts it with understanding rather than disappointment. You deserve better than this place, he tells her. Always did. Her last shift falls on a Sunday, the diner's slowest day. Jolene works beside her, training the new girl, a woman in her 40s who needs the work and isn't asking questions. Ray makes Clara's favorite sandwich without being asked, slides it across the counter during her break. On the house, he grunts. Don't argue. She doesn't. At 3 p.m., the diner door opens, and Rayan walks in for the first time in a week. He's been scarce since the arrest, handling business back in Los Angeles, giving the town space to process what happened without his presence as a constant reminder. He takes his usual seat at the counter. Clara pours coffee without asking. Heard you're leaving, he says. News travels fast in small towns. It does. He sips the coffee, studying her face. The bruise has faded to a yellowish shadow, barely visible now, but they both remember what it looked like fresh. Where are you headed? North. Maybe Colorado. Maybe further. Somewhere that needs waitresses and doesn't ask too many questions. Clara wipes down the counter, the familiar motion grounding her. What about you? Back to Los Angeles tonight. I have businesses that need attention. He pauses. But I wanted to make sure you were all right before I left. I'm better than all right. Clara meets his eyes, and she means it. I'm not scared anymore. That's worth more than you know. Rayan reaches into his jacket and pulls out an envelope, sets it on the counter between them. There's a number inside. A lawyer I trust in Denver. If you end up in Colorado and need work, call her. She runs a victim advocacy nonprofit, always looking for people with experience who understand how these systems work. Clara stares at the envelope. Why would you? Because you stood up when it mattered. Because you got other people to stand up. That takes strength most people don't have. He slides the envelope closer to her. And because people like you shouldn't have to keep serving coffee in diners that don't deserve you. She takes the envelope with shaking hands, tucks it into her apron. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just promise me something. What? What? Don't let this break you. Don't let what Gil did make you smaller or more afraid. You're stronger than you think, Clara Mitchell. Make sure the world knows it. Her eyes burn. She blinks rapidly, professional composure cracking. Thank you. For everything. For seeing what was happening and actually doing something about it. You did the hard part. I just removed some obstacles. Rayan finishes his coffee and stands, leaving 2 20s on the counter. Take care of yourself. He's almost to the door when Clara calls after him. Rayan? He turns. Who are you really? Not the surface answer. The real one. He considers this for a moment, then smiles, small, genuine. Someone who got tired of watching people with power abuse it. Someone who decided to use his own power differently. He pauses at the threshold. And someone who believes justice is supposed to mean something. Then he's gone. The door closing behind him. His black car pulling out of the parking lot and disappearing down the highway toward Los Angeles and whatever world he came from. Clara stands at the counter, envelope in her apron, surrounded by the familiar sounds of the diner. Jolene appears beside her, having watched the entire exchange. "You gonna call that number?" she asks. Clara touches the envelope through the fabric. "Yeah, I think I am." "Good." Jolene squeezes her shoulder. "You deserve a fresh start. Somewhere that doesn't have Mark Gill's ghost hanging over it." The rest of the shift passes in a blur of routine. Orders taken, coffee poured, tables cleared. At closing time, Clara hangs up her apron for the last time and walks out into the desert evening where her old Honda sits waiting. The drive north starts tomorrow. Tonight, she sits in her motel room and opens the envelope. Inside is a business card, crisp and professional. Rebecca Chen, attorney at law, victim advocacy and civil rights. A Denver address, a phone number. And underneath, in precise handwriting, "Call when you're ready. There's work here for people who've lived through what you've lived through. R.M." Clara sets the card on the nightstand and lies back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in 6 days and 6 months, if she's being honest, she feels like the future might hold something other than survival. The morning Clara leaves town, she drives past the diner one last time. The neon sign flickers in the early light, the same rhythm of dying bulbs it's had since she arrived. But something about the building looks different now. Lighter, maybe. Or maybe that's just her. The highway stretches north through desert that's starting to bloom with spring wildflowers, unexpected color in a landscape defined by emptiness. Clara drives with the windows down, radio playing songs she doesn't know, the envelope with Rebecca Chen's card tucked safely in her glove compartment. She doesn't know if she'll use it, doesn't know if victim advocacy work is something she can handle or even wants. But having the option, having someone believe she's capable of more than pouring coffee, feels revolutionary. In Los Angeles, Rayan Macias sits in his office overlooking the city, reviewing contracts that suddenly feel trivial after spending 2 weeks in a desert town dismantling corruption. Dimitri appears in the doorway with updates about their various enterprises, but Rayan finds his attention wandering. "You're distracted," Dimitri observes. "I'm reconsidering priorities." "Because of the waitress?" "Because of the principal." Rayan closes the contract folder. "We spend so much time building power, protecting territory, managing threats. What if we used that infrastructure for something that actually mattered?" Dimitri raises an eyebrow. "You want to start doing charity work?" "I want to start doing meaningful work." Rayan stands, moving to the window. There are Mark Gills everywhere, people with authority who abuse it because they've never faced consequences. What we did in that town, removing protections, exposing corruption, making the system work, we could do that other places. That's dangerous thinking. Good. Back in the desert town, life continues with the strange normalcy that follows upheaval. Pete keeps the diner running. Jolene trains new staff. Deputy Wilson transitions to interim sheriff while they search for permanent replacement, someone from outside, someone without local connections or corruption. The trial date approaches. Witnesses prepare testimony. The federal prosecutor builds a case designed to send messages about accountability and consequence. And in a federal holding facility, Mark Gill sits in a cell, much like the one he put Rayan in, learning what powerlessness feels like from the inside. The town doesn't celebrate. There's no party, no public vindication, no moment of collective triumph. Instead, there's the quiet satisfaction of people who survived something terrible and came out the other side changed but intact. In Denver, Clara's phone rings. She's been in the city for a week, working a temporary job at a hotel while she figures out her next move. The number isn't one she recognizes. "Hello? Is this Clara Mitchell?" A woman's voice, professional but warm. "Yes?" "My name is Rebecca Chen. Rayan Macias suggested I reach out to you directly rather than wait for you to call." A pause. "He thought you might need a push. I have a position available if you're interested. It's not glamorous work, and it doesn't pay much, but it matters. You'd be helping people navigate systems that aren't designed to help them. People like you were a few weeks ago." Clara sits on the edge of her hotel bed, processing. "What kind of position?" "Victim advocate. You'd work with people who've experienced abuse from authority figures, police, employers, landlords, help them document evidence, file complaints, navigate legal processes. We provide the resources they need to fight back the right way." It's terrifying and perfect, and exactly what Clara didn't know she needed. "When can I start?" Rebecca's smile is audible through the phone. "How about Monday?" That night, Clara calls the diner. Jolene answers, her voice warm with recognition. "How's the big city?" "Overwhelming. But good." Clara hesitates. "I got a job, doing advocacy work, helping people who've been through what we went through." That's perfect. That's exactly right. Jolene's voice thickens with emotion. You're gonna help a lot of people, Clara. I hope so. They talk for 20 minutes, sharing updates, processing everything that's happened. When they hang up, Clara feels connected to the town in a way she never did while living there, bound not by geography but by shared experience and survival. The work starts Monday. It's hard, emotionally draining, often frustrating, but Clara discovers she's good at it. She understands fear because she's lived it, understands silence because she's broken it, understands the courage it takes to challenge authority because she knows the cost of not challenging it. Somewhere in Los Angeles, Rayan receives updates about the trial. Gil's attorney negotiates a plea deal, 15 years federal prison in exchange for testimony against the other officials involved. The ecosystem collapses completely, and the town begins the slow work of rebuilding with clean foundations. Rayan doesn't return to the desert, doesn't need to. The work he started there continues without him, the way good work should, self-sustaining, meaningful, lasting. He does send one message to Clara through Rebecca Chen. You were right to not stay silent. Keep speaking. Clara frames the message and hangs it above her desk at the advocacy center. Justice didn't arrive with sirens or spectacle. It arrived quietly, patiently, through the accumulated weight of people deciding that silence had protected cruelty long enough. It arrived when a waitress stopped apologizing for someone else's violence. When a sheriff's power was measured against actual law and found worthless. When a man in a black suit understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is remove the floor from underneath people who thought they'd never fall. The desert town heals slowly. The diner's neon sign still flickers. Coffee still costs $3. But the fear that lived in the spaces between words, that's gone now, replaced by something cautious but real. The possibility that things can change if enough people decide they should. And in Denver, Clara Mitchell helps people find their voices, one case at a time, carrying forward the lesson she learned in a dying town, that justice doesn't always roar, but when it speaks, silence can't survive it. Thanks for staying with this story right till the final moment. You're the reason these stories come alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to see your thoughts and connect with you down there.